Thank you for tuning into the Landing Zone. This podcast is a forum to help service members, veterans, and military spouses find their next career by providing them information, resources, and motivational stories. Really, this is a very special podcast because today's podcast features a Vetlanta member, veteran advocate, and friend, Casey Sullivan. Casey grew up in Texas and became an international model. After several years, she walked away from that industry completely and utterly diminished physically, mentally, emotionally. She threw herself into fashion design school, where she rapidly gained success, landing an international internship turned a job at Versace before graduating. After a short time there, new opportunities presented themselves. She jumped into a career as a freelance wardrobe designer and stylist for TV and film and fashion photography, working for companies such as the Disney Channel. In conjunction with her work in fashion, she went back to school for rehabilitation services and nonprofit business and started working in the nonprofit sector. After 17 years through personal experiences, formal education, the lessons she learned, and all the jobs she's worked, she just knocked it out of the ballpark, and she started her own business, curating confidence, which offers a hybrid client experiences that foster the development of a internal self-confidence and image through assessments and internal coaching in conjunction with strategic wardrobe curation to help you feel like the most confident version of yourself from inside and out. Hey, we all could use confidence inside and out. Casey, welcome to the Landing Zone.
Hey, thanks, Lloyd. I'm so excited
Yeah,
to be
I'm
here with
I'm
you.
pumped too. One of my common sayings in at UPS and in the Vetlanta community, as a veteran community, we are only as strong as our non-veteran advocates. So first of all, I want to thank you for being such a wonderful and great veteran advocate. So why veterans, Casey?
It was, I would have to say, more accidental than planned, to be honest. I have a long history of family in the military, grandparents, uncles. I have two cousins currently serving, one in the Air Force, one in the Army. Both have been in for over 20 years. So definitely have seen it in my family. But I think really, as I started getting engaged in the community here in Atlanta and how prevalent the veteran community is here, often because of resources like Vetlanta that offers to people, it was such an easy fit. My sweet spot in work is working with people in big life transitions, and who more than veterans are going through a big life transition often when they're stepping out of the military. So it really became a very organic thing for me to get involved in and really be able to put time, energy, and love behind. So
Yeah, transition definitely. You've gone through some transition. Oh my goodness, your your story is full of it. I'm going to use one of my favorite movies, True Grit. Um, and it's probably very relevant since you're from Texas. You've been faced some severe challenges that life has given you personally and professionally. What advice can you offer to one of our audience for somebody who's struggling?
yeah, well, growing up in Texas and having a dad that was a huge John Wayne fan, I can get behind True Grit reference. So, thank you for that. I don't think anybody doesn't have adversity in their life, right? There's all stuff that we come across in struggles, and mine just happened to be very public because of the industry that I was in. And one thing I would say is, first, it's recognizing that we're not always going to be immediately able to find the good in a negative. People are always like, look for the silver lining. That's amazing. But when you're in the trenches, sometimes you just got to get to neutral first. So if you're struggling to find a positive, at least try to find a neutral for you. Um, you can't always flip a negative into a positive. Sometimes you have to find that neutral first. And as hard as it might be, I think I've seen this a lot with veterans specifically, but with all of us, asking for help can create a level of shame in an individual. And so, really being able to let that armor down and seek support with even just a one trusted person in your community is a great place to start. When you're facing adversity or struggles of any kind. And I really had to lean into that. I was really struggling with a lot of shame, and I was so sure that I had to fix it all myself. And when I really let go and let others in around me that could be a support system, that's when I was able to get the help I
That
really
is
needed.
such great advice and so pertinent for the veteran community because as veterans, we try to fix everything ourselves. And-
I
which
know.
is crazy because the military community as a whole, it's all about the we. In fact, as a recruiter
Right.
and a talent acquisition professional, most of the advice I give is stop saying we and start saying I. But when you're struggling, stop saying I and start saying we. Go out and find the assistance you need because it's out there, whatever you're going through. So, in addition
Absolutely.
to that, what are some of the other things you've learned through some of the trials and tribulations that you faced in your life?
Anything specifically you want me to speak on when you say that? Because I feel like I could go down many
No,
tangents here.
it's your tangent to go down.
um, Anything else I would say in terms of support on transitioning? Is that what you're
No,
asking?
personally for you, where have some of these trials and tribulations? Where have you grown because of that?
Oh goodness. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood your question originally. So growing, introspection, really being able to sit in the ick and recognizing where I need to hold myself accountable for. You can't play victim all the time. You have to be able to say, woe is me, but sure, like there's so many other people going through struggles, and being able to step out of, like, yes, I need that moment to process emotions. You have every right to feel every single one of those emotions, and you need to, but then also recognizing when it's time to say, now I need to focus on getting work help or getting better or taking accountability in whatever that might be. And I think that was definitely one of the more valuable lessons I've learned in this is how to let myself just kind of sit with that ick and figure out what I need and stop listening to all the outside voices all the time, because I'm a habitual people pleaser, and really, or what I like to say, I'm a recovering people
Yeah.
pleaser. And I was listening to a lot of outside sources that I wanted to make happy, but they all had different opinions, and I was never going to make all of them happy. And then I would sit in this like cycle of stress and saying, wait, what do I really want? And how do I take accountability of what's next for me? And then finding the resources that I need for that next step, whether it's education, professional development, therapy. I've done it all. So,
My pastor at Grace Point gave a wonderful sermon last year on people pleasing, and yeah, definitely, I like that. I'm a recovering people pleaser. So, hey, where in Texas did you grow up at?
so I grew up in this lovely little town called Amarillo. It is in that square part at the top of the state, like smack in the middle. It's not close to anything like Dallas or Austin or Houston that everyone's like, oh, no, it's oil and
And a
cattle,
great
baby.
song, Amarillo by Morning. So, my
Yes. Yep. George
my
Strait as
nephew went to
well.
college there and now works at in one of the oil refineries. So when I went to his wedding, they do have a great Texas show out in the national park. Though it was
Yes.
pretty fabulous.
Yes. I think that's really cool. I didn't know you've been there. So Paladuro is
Yeah,
such a hidden gem. Right outside of Amarillo, it's the second largest canyon on this hemisphere. So it's really
yeah.
cool.
The only reason why people haven't heard about this wonderful gem because it's in Amarillo.
Yeah, I know.
So how'd you end up?
But I've been
Yeah. So how'd you end up in Georgia?
really opportunity. I I've lived in a lot of big cities. working in fashion for a long time, the larger markets tend to be better for me in that space. And I had moved back to Amarillo to kind of get back on my feet with a lot of my health issues, get the support that I needed from my very loving and supportive family. And when I was ready to move forward, I knew that I needed a bigger market again. And Atlanta just happened to have a lot of opportunity that I was excited about. And it has turned out to be, I didn't know this at the time, the best of both worlds for me. There's a big city, but there's also like this Southern hospitality that I grew up in, for lack of a better explanation. So it's kind of the balance of big city, and I live just outside of the city, thank goodness. So I get to retreat to like space and area and nature.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things I like about it too. I'm an avid kayaker and play a lot of pickleball too. But like I can be on the Chattahoochee River kayaking in 5 minutes from my house, or I can go hit the AT approach trail up in Amacola Falls, Dahlonega, a within a 35-40 minute drive. So it's pretty. I
Right.
love this area. So what do you like to do for fun around here?
I think you kind of nailed it. I do love hiking. Kayaking is I enjoy that as well. Much less experienced in that, but it's okay. I enjoy all the amateur things. But really, I'm a social person. So if you invite me out to do anything with friends,
Yeah.
I'm in. Like what I enjoy is meeting people, talking to people, having conversations. I don't really usually care what the activity is. I just like spending time with people. And then when I'm needing time to myself, I am a huge crafter. So obviously, with my background in fashion design, I make a lot of things. Currently, I'm doing leather work with purses and stuff like that. That's just fun for me.
Cool. So let's talk
Yeah.
about fashion, and let's talk about fashion as it relates to our audience. So we have an audience. Say we have an
Yes.
audience member who, like me, who joined the military when they were 17, and now they're 38, and they're landing their first interview. What should they wear to that interview?
So I actually want to start back it up just a little bit because I think that the specifics of what you're wearing isn't as important as understanding what to step into. So let me explain. I don't know if you've ever heard the term enclothed cognition, but I'm going to nerd out on you for just a second on the neuroemotional side of things. There's been dozens of studies. The original one was done by, I believe, Columbia University, but it's the study of how our clothes actually affect our brain. And they did a study with a control group. They gave them an activity. They just showed up in whatever they chose to wear. They performed the activity. Then they brought the group back in. They put them in an outfit and they called it a painter's coat. And then they had them redo the activity in a painter's coat. And then they brought them back in and they put them in a doctor's lab coat and had them redo the activity. And so they've done this thousands and thousands of times. And what it really was trying to show was the neuro side of how clothes affect your performance. And the most focused, most detail oriented, most success in the activity was performed by the control group when they were in the doctor
Wow.
lab coats because their brain was tied to the idea that doctors have to perform at a high level. They're paying attention to details. They're super smart. They're hardworking. Whatever their story behind a doctor is, created a shift in how they performed the activity. Same thing when you put on a painter's coat, you feel more creative. You're thinking, oh, like a painter, they do art, they do fun things, they're able to play more, maybe. And that showed up in how they performed the activity. So, thinking about that study moving into an interview process is really understanding how are you going to perform and what is going to help you perform your best. And situational awareness ties into this. I think one of the things our culture is really lacking right now in the style aesthetics is situational awareness. Sometimes we're so focused on, like, well, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it. I don't care what anybody thinks. There's a level of that's important. Also, clothing is a sign of respect to yourself and to the person you're meeting with. So, particularly in an interview, situational awareness is very important. When our parents were interviewing for jobs, it was just a standard. The guys came in a suit and tie, women came in usually either in dress pants or a skirt and dress shoes and a nice blouse, something to that effect, right? And those cultural rules have kind of since dissipated some. And so understanding like what industry are you going to go interview with, that can factor in. But knowing that you are showing up as you're trying to sell yourself. So how can you feel good using that enclothed cognition reference, feel confident, and put your best self forward into the person that you're meeting with? And I use this a lot because my significant other is a nuclear engineer, and he is on the hiring side at this point in his career. And he will flat out say, if an engineer comes in for a job and they have unpressed clothes, it's not about how fashionable you are, but those details translate into someone's mind. If they don't have the cognizant ability to take care of their presentation, why do I think they're going to pay attention to the details on my nuclear reactors? And so it's not something that most interviewers are probably consciously aware of, but they're subconsciously going down a checklist in their brain of, is this person showing up well? How are they going to take care of the projects that they're assigned, whatever your work might be? And so I think it's being really cognizant of those things when you're selecting and being aware.
I absolutely dig that answer because I've asked this question on numerous panels over the years, and often the answer I get is it depends. So but I love situational awareness. I think situational awareness is a much better description of it. If I were to give any advice, and believe me, you do not want to take fashion advice from me, but if I was going to give any advice, it would be prepared. And I've got a great story. So I've been retired now for 17 and a half years and been with UPS since. When I was interviewing with UPS, and this dates back pre-virtual meetings, so it was about 18 years ago, and I was doing telephone interviews. And I did a series of telephone interviews, and the last one I did was like on a Wednesday at like 5 p.m. It lasted for an hour and a half. Went really, really well. And like you should do, I followed up with an email after the interview, and it essentially said, "Hey, I'm only a 6-hour drive. I can be down in Atlanta for an in-person interview very, very quickly, and would love to hear back from you." So the next day, I go to work and get a call from my late wife now, and at lunchtime she goes, "Hey, UPS called you. They want you in Atlanta for a job interview tomorrow at 7:30." So I was like, oh. So I went and finished up some work. Went and talked to my commander, who gave me a pass. I had to take care of a couple things. Um, Went and grabbed my suit out of the closet, grabbed my shoes, threw on a t-shirt and a pair of shorts and some flip flops, and headed down the road, and got to up in Alpharetta, where I was interviewing, about 1:30 in the morning. I stayed at the Holiday Inn, and I woke up really early, like you should do, to have a little bit of caffeine, and just to make sure I'm gonna get to the place on time. And then pulled my suit out of the bag and went to put it on, and it was my oldest son's suit. So which
Oh
is a
no.
big thing because I was kicking 220 and he was wrestling competitively about 120. So the pants would not fit over my knees. So I went through every emotional feeling you could have in about a 30-second period. And I don't exaggerate, I almost started crying because it was
I don't
such
know.
a good opportunity at UPS, and I'm like, I blew it. And then I went into anger. It's like, I can't believe I did this. And then I went into resolve. I was like, I'm going to make this happen. So I like ran full sprint, and I'm not exaggerating, to the front desk. And I'm like, where's Walmart at? I need to go to Walmart. And the guy just looked at me with like these big eyes. And you got to understand, I was coming from Goldsboro, North Carolina. Our Walmart was not open 24/7, nor did it have suits. But I was like, I'm going to put something together. And so he barely understood English. He just pointed down the road, and I went and I walked into the door, and there were George suits sitting right at the front. So I grabbed that suit. I actually put it on in the parking lot of Walmart's. And showed up at the interview with like 5 minutes, early. And the very last question they asked me was, "Tell me about a time when you faced adversity." And I'm like, yeah, an hour ago. And I told them the story, and they're like, "Oh my goodness!" They're like, "You could have just came in shorts." And I'm like, "Would you have hired me?" And they admitted, "No, we wouldn't have hired you." So I wore that George suits for years. It was my lucky suit, right?
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
my late wife had bought me like 5 Joseph A. Bank suits, and I had them all custom tailored. And this one didn't even fit right, but it was just love that suit, and I wore it
Right.
out because I UPS used to wear suits all the time, and then I was traveling internationally. And she
Mhm.
finally looked at me and was like, "Lloyd, you got to throw that suit away." Like, right, it's got to go. So
It's
so
gotta go.
yeah,
See, it's
like you
season.
gave some great advice, such awareness. My advice is make sure you're comfortable, and then make sure that you do a pre-check like the night before. Like, right, you have all the right things and
Right?
everything
100%.
fits. So now UPS is a great example of this. UPS used to be really strictly suits, and then what we called flex business attire. But we moved over to casual like 3 or 4 years ago
Mhm.
because we had to because we um, the workforce wants to work casual, and so it's
Yes.
hard to attract and retain employees if you're not keeping up with the trends. I have a beard now because UPS changed their beard policy. We just turned 117 years old, and for 116 years we had a no beard policy. So we did. So
Really?
when I left the Air Force and came into UPS, our dress standards were about the same, our appearance standards. So
Mhm.
so now when we see employers go, "Hey, it's casual wear," what exactly does that mean? And what are some of the things you should avoid?
Yes. So it's tricky because our culture has become so incredibly casual, and COVID just pushed it over that edge even further, right? Like, you talk about all the work from home outfits that people had, and one of the biggest things I really saw in individuals and clients in that time frame was their productivity went down, and they were struggling, and they were like, I just can't seem to get motivated, and I don't know what's going on. And I had to really ask a serious question. I said, this is going to sound silly, but I'm going to ask you a question. Did you put pants on today? Because now you're not required to, right? You're working from home. You're Most of the time you probably have your camera off even, so no one sees you. So there's no external push to put any effort into how you look. But that didn't change the wiring in your brain. And you have been every day for how many years you've been working, or even prior to that, you wake up, you do your morning routine, whatever that looks like, coffee, shower, get dressed, go to work. And that activates your brain. Like, oh, my day is starting. I need to be productive now. Well, when you skip steps like showering and getting dressed, your brain hasn't fully gone through its process of waking up. And so now you're not performing at the same level because your brain hasn't caught up with what's going on in your day. And it sounds kind of silly, but it's just how our brains are wired. And you can rewire them, but that takes time. And so I think with casual dressing, the key again is situational awareness. Who are you meeting with? What are your expectations? What are you moving boxes that day, or are you meeting with clients that day? And casual can vary based on that situation. But I think it never hurts, whether you're working from home or going out and about, is to put an intention behind your outfit. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be dressed up, but be intentional. Have it look put together, make sure it's clean, make sure there's no crazy wrinkles. Take pride in your presentation. And it translates so much into the marketing of yourself. People spend thousands of dollars, depending on the industry, maybe even more, on marketing. What's your website look like? What does your social media look like? What do your materials look like? And then their employees look disheveled, and there's mixed messaging in that marketing. You have clients walking in and they're meeting with people that aren't, it just doesn't, it's not congruent, and therefore it can really even hurt marketing from that perspective. So I think when you really think about the fact, and you'll get a kick out of this because of Mike Reynolds, but he really took me very literal when I said, you're a walking billboard for yourself. What are you trying to say? And it, again, doesn't have to be super dressed up, but be
So
intentional with
Mike
it.
Reynolds, a Army veteran, an absolutely gem of a guy and a hero. Yeah, he runs Heroes Ag
Absolutely.
up here in North Georgia. So if you come to a Vetlanta summit, Mike will be wearing his cowboy hat. The only one wearing his scout. I usually say the only one, but he bought his son. He bought his son at the last summit. He was wearing a cowboy hat. So
Yeah.
absolutely great example. So I'm also guilty of COVID virtual. I did a job interview, and I'm glad they didn't ask that question if you were wearing pants. I had the whole suit and tie thing going on, and then yeah, I think I was wearing short pants. Yeah, under that.
It's
Yeah.
common. And there's nothing really wrong with it, but also being very realistic with yourself on how do you
Yeah.
perform better, and
I went in. So when I was stationed at Headquarters Air Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base outside of St. Louis, I had a really good year. I won a bunch of awards, and the last one I was up for was a senior NCO Academy. I'm sorry, senior NCO, so senior non-commissioned officer of the year for the entire
look at you.
command. I
Congratulations.
didn't win that one, but but interesting enough, they checked to see if our ties were ties or clip-ons. So, so so
Details
mine
matter.
was a clip-on. I actually did not learn how to tie a tie until I got the job at UPS, and Jeffrey the Giraffe on YouTube taught me how to tie a tie. So and now I'm very
Amazing.
good at tying ties, and I'm really proud of myself. And then they looked at her socks as well, which was just absolutely hilarious. So, hey, this next question, I would never have guessed in this next question, and this is not my question, but reading on what you do, and because you do some
Uh-huh.
amazing things in this,
Thank
especially
you.
in this for this next question, and then I was reading about fashion consultants online, and I found this question. I thought it would be great for you to answer, and it is: can you identify what styles of clothing look best on different body types?
Yeah. So the short answer, yes. Um, Also, what I think is important, at least particularly in the work that I do, because I really focus on the neuroemotional side as well, is, I think most people are familiar with that. A lot of people are compared to fruit shapes, your apple or pear or, whatever it might be, hourglass. So thinking, I joke a lot saying, like, quit worrying about what fruit shape you are. Let's focus on what your realities are. So two people with the same body shape aren't going to have the same struggles. But where body shape comes into play is that it is simple art principles: line, balance, proportion. So, anybody that's ever taken an art class, those are some of the first things you're taught: color theory, line, balance, proportion. And clothing, fashion, is simply painting the canvas of your body, right? So, line, balance, and proportion affects that. And so, there are aesthetically things that work better for certain shapes with balance, line, and proportion. So, I can teach you those principles. Where they become ineffective is if you've had, whether a big T or a small t trauma, and you feel insecure about certain areas of your body. And so, regardless of what this rule tells you you should be wearing, you might still feel very uncomfortable, and therefore it's not going to be effective for you. So, I have to take in consideration everything that you've gone through, everything that you're feeling, everything that we're working on, and help you create looks that make you feel and present your best, even if it isn't under the principle of line, balance, and proportion of what shape you are by industry standards, if that makes sense. And I keep using air quotes because it's it's best practice, but it's not a hard and fast
Right.
rule.
So this next question, now that I'm allowed to wear blue jeans at UPS, I love
Yes.
wearing blue jeans, and my fashion consultant, also known as Sarah Knight, is always trying to get me out of blue jeans and to dress up a little bit more. So I got to ask you, how do you handle disagreements with your clients about styling choices?
Sure. I think it's really important that going into any work with a client, they know from my perspective that they get final say in anything. Part of my job to be effective is upfront saying, hey, you've hired me for a reason, and we work through all that in the beginning. What are your goals? What's your lifestyle like? All these things, so that I can create the best, most supportive wardrobe for whatever that is going on in your current life with your current body. And if they weren't struggling with that, they wouldn't have needed to hire me. And so sometimes it's just simply saying, you get final say. I'm going to respect what you want. Here's my professional opinion, and what you invested getting is my professional opinion. So I'm going to present this to you in this way. If you absolutely choose not to do that, that's okay. You get final say and we'll work here. But this is what I'm based on everything we talked about ahead of time. This is my professional opinion. And sometimes it's just being that matter of fact about it. Like, I don't want you to waste your investment. And some of this is going to feel uncomfortable because it's new. And if you turn around and backtrack because it's uncomfortable, you're never going to reach your goals. So, how can I put a little loving pressure behind you to say, hey, we're breaching the comfort zone to get you to that level you told me you wanted to get to. We had this conversation up front. You get final say. Here's my recommendation.
Yeah, excellent. So how do you stay within a client's budget while providing stylish and personalized recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of people have a misconception that you have to be really wealthy or a celebrity to use a stylist, and otherwise it would be unnecessary. Everything I do really starts with those preliminary questions. What are your goals? What's your lifestyle like? What are your body insecurities? And what is your budget? Um, I jokingly say, Goodwill to Gucci, it doesn't matter. We can shop anywhere and make you look amazing. I just need to, if you've got $200 to work with, we're going to go in, we're going to audit what you already have. My goal is to help you utilize what you've already spent money on first. That helps our planet, because the fashion industry is horrible about pollution and all the things. So we want to stop, using so much fast fashion if we can. My personal opinion. So we want to utilize what you already own, and you've already spent money on it. So how can we make that stuff work as much as possible? We're going to audit through all that. We're going to remove the things that aren't working, so you don't revert back to bad habits, or you don't have all that mental clutter when you wake up in the morning. You're like, I have an overstuffed closet and I hate everything. Like, that doesn't help you in the morning. And then we're going to strategically shop based on your budget for the pieces that are going to fill in the gaps of what you're missing to create a full wardrobe for yourself.
Wow, going back to the beginning of it, because I'm really curious, because clothing can be
Yeah.
very personalized and it can be very emotional. So how in
Oh.
the heck do
Mhm.
you uh, establish rapport with a client to go into those personal discussions?
Yes. So that's actually a really great question, because I can honestly say I don't think I've ever had a client that at some point hasn't shed tears, because clothing is so personal, it's so emotional, it's usually tied to stories of some sort. Um, so really, for me, rapport building is huge, because if they don't trust me, if they don't feel like they can open up to me, I'm not nearly as effective. I really like to, before taking on a client, we have either a virtual coffee or an in person coffee, kind of depending if they're local or not. But I want to make sure this feels comfortable to you, that it's a good fit, that you and I spending 30 minutes to an hour together just chatting. You might have questions about my services, but I want you to ask me questions. I want you to feel comfortable with me as a person, because it's going to be instrumental in your success working with me. And not everybody is a great fit. We all have different personalities and strengths and gifts and things that we like and don't like. And that's okay. And so being able to feel really comfortable with me just in a conversation is super important. And sometimes I'm saying, I don't think you're really enjoying this. And therefore, I know other stylists. Would you like me to recommend somebody else maybe? And that sometimes happens. So
So, how can our audience find you, Casey?
curating confidence. I'm curating confidence everywhere. That's my webpage. That's my LinkedIn. It's my Instagram. I want to curate your confidence.
Sweet. So, wow, we are already out of time. Do you have any closing comments?
I just really appreciate you having me, Lloyd. I appreciate you letting me kind of dive into this. I will nerd out as long as people let me to. I think the biggest takeaway is mindfulness of self. Clothes can be tricky. They can make you feel bad about yourself. They can make you feel shame. And being able to stop in that moment of struggle and say, the clothes aren't, my body's not wrong. This is the wrong piece of clothing for me, is the biggest takeaway I could give somebody, is, in a situation where they're struggling. Your body is never wrong. The clothes are wrong for you.
Yeah, fascinating. So, my biggest takeaway is situational awareness. So,
Situational
which is funny
awareness.
because that's a military term. So especially an
Oh,
aviation term, we're all about situational awareness. But I love
yep.
that answer. So cool. Well, thank you, Casey, so much for coming on the landing zone and for being an advocate. Um, please help our listeners and viewers. Please help us spread this word about this podcast with your networks and on social media. And as always, be safe, be kind, and be remarkable.